Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to your very brief guide to writing document analysis papers. I am Miss Jennifer Blank, and I will be your guide on this journey into understanding why it's important to do them and how to do them. So why is it important? Because it's going to teach you valuable skills. Not only writing skills, which are essential in today's job market, but also thinking skills. This is going to help you in virtually everything you do because it gives you a process of thought, a method of doing things and of approaching problems, and it helps you develop solutions. So here we go. All right, so what is a DAP, a DAP as I call it? Well, that's my acronym for Document Analysis Paper, okay? Now, document analysis papers, with the way I teach them, are designed to be short. You don't want any more than 3 to 4 pages, that double space, that would be your max out, because what you want to do is really examine something, a document or 2 or 3, very, very closely as you can to really understand it. So what do I mean by document? Well, since I'm a history teacher, I'm referring to primary and secondary sources as a historian would think of them. These could be government documents, it could be a diary, a letter, it could be a sculpture. It could be anything you want. I'm going to talk about that a little bit on the next slide. But once you find your sources and you're going to analyze them, what is analysis? You need to figure out what that is. So I have a definition down here. Analysis is to break something down into its component parts and to understand the relationship between those parts. Essentially, you're going to take key ideas and you're going to deconstruct them. You're going to see all the various pieces, all the parts, all the components of what you're looking at, and you want to examine each component on its own and examine how they fit together. What is their relationship to each other? And that's what analysis is, and that's what we do. We take, as historians, we take documents and we break them apart. And we understand how they relate to each other. Now that we know essentially what document analysis is in its very basic conception, now we need to understand how to do it. Well, the first step is you want to choose a document or documents. This can be, as I said before, here's my list: paintings, letters, laws, proclamations, photos, diaries, sketches, murals, sculptures, transcripts. I mean, the list is endless. Basically anything that can give historians information about a previous time period, we would use it. We would analyze it. We would break it down into its component parts and understand the relationship between those parts. So once you've got your document or documents, you want to read, annotate, and summarize the document. Reading, I don't mean just, I'm going to skim it real quick. I mean critically read it. You've really got to take your time. You've got to make sure you understand what you are reading. Annotation really means to take special notes, okay? You want to highlight, underline, circle key phrases or words. You want to make notes on a separate sheet of paper or in the margins preferably. If it's your own copy and you can mark it up however you want, I strongly suggest making your own notes all over the page. I mean, go crazy with it. Really have a good time. You want to define words you don't know, that you don't understand, so that you can then understand them. You want to record your opinions about the text. Anything in there that pops out at you, that makes you think, oh man, that sucks, or oh, that's stupid, or oh, that's great. Anything like that, I want you to underline it. I want you to circle it. I want you to write that response that you had in the margin and point to that area of the text. And I want you to think about why that text made you think that. Okay, that's going to help you down the line when you actually start to write your paper. And after that, you want to develop a focus question. You want to develop something you're going to investigate, something you want to discover, something you want to know. All right, that this is going to focus your paper. Now, in my situation, as a secondary school teacher, I typically give my students, provide that students that focus question. But if I have an enterprising student who'd like to push the envelope and challenge themselves, I work with them so that they can create their own focus question. If you do make your own, you need to be careful how you do it. You don't want to make it so broad that you can't cover it in a short paper, but you don't want to make it so specific that there's almost nothing to write about. You're going to get a paragraph out of it and that's it. So you want to really be careful with your focus question and how you create that. So now we have a focus question. We have our documents, we've read them, we've annotated them, we've really gone into detail, we understand what we're looking at. So now we have to create a thesis statement. Now this thesis statement is going to be the foundation, the roadmap, the focus of your paper. It's what's going to tie your entire paper together. Your whole paper starts and ends. It rests. Its success rests on this thesis statement. And the way I teach students to create thesis statements is I make it a little mini equation. For history, you need a basic argument, you need a how, and a why statement. A basic argument is the essential idea that you're trying to prove. It's your opinion, but it's an opinion that must be based on fact. It has to be based on some sort of evidence that you're going to pull from those documents. You need a how. Now that how can take the shape of how a individual that you're studying was able to accomplish something. It could take the shape of the process that was used to create the basic argument. And then you also need a why. Why is about motive. It's about purpose. It's about intent. Where how is about process, a procedure. So if you're going to start out your how, you might want to think about the key phrases by or through. Something was able to occur through the blank process or by this procedure. And with why, since you're thinking about intent and motive, you might want to start off that part of the thesis with in order to. This was accomplished in order to do this, or so-and-so did this because they wanted to do this. So in order to and because are some useful phrases to start out the why part of this statement. Once you've got your thesis, and your thesis is solid, and you're able to prove it, then you've got to choose quotes from the document that involve the focus question and also prove this thesis statement. Now, with writing this paper, everything you do is all about the thesis statement. It all must tie back to your central argument. Otherwise, it has no purpose in the paper, and it's just going to take away from what you're trying to say. Your audience is not going to be engaged, and they're not going to be convinced of what you're trying to argue. So when I say quotes, I mean the exact wording of the author from the document or documents. So you're going to literally put quotation marks around it and take a phrase or a sentence or two from this document, and you're going to insert that in your paper, and you're going to analyze that and prove to your audience, whoever's reading your paper, that this quote is evidence for your thesis, that it backs up what you're trying to prove. And it must prove your argument. If it doesn't directly involve the thesis statement, it has no business being in there. So please be careful with that. Then you're going to write the paper. You're going to start with an introduction. You need some body paragraphs, and you need a conclusion. Okay, now that we've talked about what a focus question is, what a thesis statement is, and the very basic structure of an essay, now I want to show you what this looks like. Okay, so what does this look like? So here I have a sample focus question for you. I wanted to start with this rather broad question because everybody pretty much understands what history is. It's a familiar topic, so I thought this would be a good starting point. So the focus question, should students study history? If so, why should they? If they should not, why not? How is it useful or not useful for students? So I've got this focus question, and here's my possible thesis. Students should study history in order to make society function better, and history allows people to do this by helping humans understand human nature. So here I have my basic argument. Students should study history. All right, and then you see here is my why, because it starts with in order to make society function better. And then my how, history allows people to do this by helping humans understand human nature. So you see the operative terms are by and in order to. All right, so we've got the basic argument, we've got the why, and we've got the how. So this is a sample of what that looks like. I started to talk about this earlier, but I really want to emphasize this. I cannot possibly overemphasize this enough. When you are choosing quotations, they have to directly relate to the thesis. They must directly relate. It has to prove the thesis, and it must be from a reliable source. Your grandma telling you that history is good times is not a reliable source according to academic standards. So you have to go and find something from history, a historian, or something directly from the primary source itself. You need to find a reliable source. You can't just pick anything. It has to be something that your audience will view as authoritative, something that will be convincing to them. Now let's spend a couple of minutes talking about essay structure. Your essay should contain 3 basic components: an introduction, some body paragraphs, and a conclusion, okay? Now with the introduction, at least for a history essay, we want to make sure we talk about the historical context. If you're going to talk about, say, the American Revolution, for example, maybe the person reading your paper has no idea what the American Revolution is. So you need to explain that a little bit. Explain what was happening at the time. Give the reader the big picture, and then start moving slowly into identifying the question that you're going to explore. You want to let the reader know what they're going to learn in this essay. So you want to be upfront about that. In academic papers, you don't want surprises. Surprises are not a good thing. You want to be upfront and clear about what it is you're trying to prove. And then after you identify the question being explored, you want to go into your thesis statement. And then you wrap up your introductory paragraph with that statement. And then you must transition. Remember, transitions are very important, folks. You must have transitions in essays. Okay? Whoops, I spelled that wrong. Transitions. All right, so you have to have transitions. You have to lead your reader in from one paragraph to another. With the body paragraphs, you have to start out with a topic sentence. That's the first sentence of the paragraph, and it's going to let the reader know what you're going to talk about. Depending on the type of essay you're writing, you could have any number of body paragraphs. I usually recommend 2 to 3 for, a 2 to 4 page paper. Well, 4-page paper is going to be a little bit more. So you have to start out with the topic sentence, then move into the context of the quote. Set the stage for the reader. Then you want to introduce the quote. State who the author is. What document did this come from? Give the reader a little bit of background about that. That's the context part. You want to give the reader a little bit of background about the quote. Then you want to put the quote in there, and then the most important part is to analyze the quote. That's where you take that quote apart, you take those words apart, and you directly relate it to your thesis. As a teacher, I know what I think about that quote, but I don't know what you think about it. And that's what I need to see. This is the best part because this is your opinion. This is your view. This is your evidence. This is how you're going to prove your argument, okay? So this is the most important part. And you must always remember to relate it directly to the thesis. Then we move into our conclusion. This is where you summarize the focus question and the topic under study. You restate your thesis, okay? And then you summarize the evidence you presented and wrap all of this up into a nice, neat package for the reader. Now that I've told you some things that you should do, let me tell you some things that you shouldn't do for academic papers. When you're seeking to persuade or you're writing an analytical essay, any academic paper, you do not want to use first or second person. Let me tell you why. First or second person lends less authority to your argument. When you're speaking in third person, you take an objective point of view. And at least with history, we are very concerned with being objective. That's our goal. We don't want to make moral or value judgments about what occurred in history. We are simply seeking to understand how and why these things happened. So when you use first or second person, you become less objective. All right? And objectivity is going to lend a lot of credibility to your case, to your argument. You don't want to use contractions because they're too informal. Whenever possible, you want to spell out these words. Quotes are an exception. If there's stuff in the quotes, you leave that as is. But your own writing, you want to avoid contractions. You don't want to use a different format than the teacher indicates because that will drive us crazy. It's one of our pet peeves. We tell you to write it in Times New Roman 12-point font or whatever it is that we tell you. We want you to do it that way. So please follow those instructions. Don't use colloquialisms. That's slang, okay? This is a formal paper. You want to use formal language, okay? You're not writing a text message to your best friend down the street. You definitely don't want to use inaccurate information. You'd be amazed at how often that occurs. Make sure you fact check everything that's in there. You also do not want to give in to personal bias, all right? We care what you think, but it's what you think based on fact, not because you don't like something. There has to be a reason you don't like it. You have to have evidence for it. So to just give in to personal bias, again, takes away the objectivity. Now with personal bias, you're totally taken out being objective completely. Loaded language also takes away, using loaded language takes away from your objectivity as well in some cases. That is a stylistic thing. That depends on what you're talking about. And of course, using improper grammar is in no way acceptable. You must make sure that your paper is grammatically correct or you will lose significant points. And now finally, what did we learn? Well, we were learning today about DAPs, document analysis papers, and we learned that you have to start out with a focus question. And once you get that focus question, you move into the thesis statement. And you must remember that thesis statement has to directly address the focus question that you are seeking to understand. Then after you have the thesis statement, you move into your introduction, okay? And you have to lay out in your introduction the context, talk about the focus question, end with your thesis. Then you move into body paragraphs where you must analyze direct quotations from your primary sources, and then you move into your conclusion. I hope that this was useful for you. I hope it answered some of your questions about document analysis, and I will see you next time.